Okay, federal funding is a trickier animal because it doesn't necessarily flow. I mean, it's a block grant, and it's a block grant for the states, and then there's then it gets bundled up, and it's all depending on different funding formulas that the states use. Okay, and in Alabama, which is where you're at, they use butts and seats. Okay, and that's why so many schools get really sideways and crazy when it comes to truancy. I know Texas is like that. Most states will do their funding formula based upon how many students are actually attending, and I think that is absolutely crazy because it doesn't take into consideration kids with chronic health issues. There needs to be some rethinking on that. Now, the other complexity is that with charter schools, with the introduction of charter schools, also with the increase in the number of parents homeschooling, the number of parents that are deciding to go private school, they're abandoning the public education system. So we actually, in a lot of places, including Alabama, we tend to have stagnant growth, especially in our rural counties. And we see increase in some of the cities. But what we're seeing is stagnant growth with regards to neurotypical students, but we're seeing an increase in the roles of special education identified students. Well, there's no more money that comes. The feds, when it comes to funding special education, preschool, those kind of things, I mean, it's sort of been a static amount around 14% when they're supposed to be contributing 40%. And they haven't really gone above the 14%, which means that if you have funding mechanisms based upon butts and seats, and you have stagnant enrollment for your neurotypical or general education students, but you have an uptick, it's not like there's more money. It just means that either the state or the local school has to sit there and make up that difference because the feds aren't increasing their amount. So that's why a lot of these school systems are turning sort of rancid against special education because they're seeing their roles go up, but they're seeing their public education students, which they need both to be around the same level in order for that to compensate. Well, 20 years ago, the state and the federal funds were making up around 50% of the special education need. Well, that's not like that anymore because, like I said, there's now an imbalance. Because a lot of charter schools or private schools won't accept special education students, because they are on a lottery system. Well, how hard is it to manipulate that? Then the other factor is that there's a lot of parents that they just can't homeschool their special education kids. So they need them inside public education. So you see a decrease in the number of kids available on the general education side to sit there and make up that difference in funding, which means that the state and the federal or the state and the local governments are having to absorb more of the cost for special education, which, like I said, is also creating an animosity because it's also impacting school scores when it comes to their high stakes end of year testing. So we need to change the funding mechanism. The funding mechanism is really creating some problems, and we need to rethink it because it's archaic. We've been doing these crazy funding mechanisms for far too long, and it's having a rippling impact that many people aren't taking into consideration, and we're just not funding special education like we need to.